When the police arrived, 2 attackers were already dead, and 3 lay sprawled on the ground, moaning and bleeding. My unfaithful wife, Lauren, stood trembling in the corner, her face pale, her phone clutched in her shaking hand. She hadn't dialed a single number. I glared at her, my voice cold and steady. Did you really think that I, a battle-hardened Marine, would be scared of these lowlifes? You were mistaken. But you'll still have to answer for your betrayal. I wasn't done yet. I hadn't planned for my week to end like this, bodies strewn across my driveway, a trembling wife, and the flashing red and blue lights of Dallas PD reflecting off the shattered glass of my front door. Yet, here I was, standing in the chaos I never thought would define my life. Let me start at the beginning, though you might not believe how it all spiraled out of control. It began with something as small as a locked phone. Lauren, my wife of nearly 7 years, had never been secretive. She was 31, a marketing manager with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue. I'm Ethan, 34, a retired Marine turned gym owner. We had always had an open dynamic, shared passwords, phones left unlocked on the counter. It was normal. Comfortable. Until it wasn't. Over the last month, her phone rarely left her hand. When it wasn't in use, it lay face down on the nightstand. At first, I didn't think much of it, until the first red flag smacked me in the face. Got something to hide? I joked one evening, grabbing a beer from the fridge. Her reaction was too rehearsed, too deliberate. She laughed, leaning on the counter with a casualness that didn't match her overly sweet tone. Oh, come on, Ethan. Don't be that guy. I shrugged it off like an idiot. But I couldn't shake the strange feeling that something was off. The second red flag came a week later. Lauren started staying late at work. Deadlines, she'd sigh, kissing me on the cheek before slipping out the door, her heels clicking like a countdown timer. At first, I didn't question it. She had always been ambitious, her career a constant focus. But something about her tone felt different. Forced. It wasn't just the late nights, though. She grew distant. Her laughter, once full and genuine, felt hollow. The little gestures that had once made us feel close, brushing her hand against mine, leaning into my shoulder, disappeared. Lauren wasn't just drifting, she was running. And I didn't know why. It all came to a head one Thursday night. I decided to surprise her at work with dinner. Nothing fancy, just takeout from her favorite Thai place, a peace offering of sorts. We hadn't been connecting, and I thought a small gesture might help. When I pulled into the parking lot of her downtown office, I saw her car. But the building was dark. No lights, no sign of life. My stomach twisted. I called her, keeping my voice casual. Hey, babe, still at work? Her response was smooth, too smooth. Yeah. It's been a long day. I'll be home in a few hours. My hands tightened on the wheel as I stared up at the empty office windows. Want me to bring you something to eat? No need, Ethan, she replied lightly. I'll grab something on the way home. I hung up, the takeout bag crinkling in my lap, and drove off, my mind racing. When she came home later, she slipped into bed quietly, her perfume sharper than usual. She didn't say a word, didn't even face me. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, knowing in my gut that something was wrong. That was when I started paying attention, really paying attention. Lauren's routines had changed in ways I hadn't noticed before. There were new clothes, lingerie she hadn't worn for me. Whispers during phone calls. Errands that stretched into hours. Then came the undeniable proof. It was a Friday night. She'd gone to yoga, a class she'd supposedly started attending at a studio downtown. While cleaning the kitchen, I found a receipt crumpled in her purse. It wasn't for yoga, or anything remotely innocent. It was from a luxury hotel. The Grand Regency. Dated just 2 days prior. When she came home, I confronted her. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I just held up the receipt. "What's this?" I asked, my voice steady. Her reaction was quick, too quick. She froze, a makeup wipe in one hand, and blinked at me before letting out a short laugh. "Oh, that? It's from work. A client meeting at the Regency." I stepped closer, my eyes narrowing. Funny, I didn't know they hosted meetings in hotel suites. Her face hardened. "Are you seriously spying on me, Ethan? For God's sake, you're being paranoid." She grabbed the receipt, crumpling it in her fist, and stormed out of the room. The slam of the bedroom door echoed through the house. But this time, I didn't feel paranoid. I felt certain. Lauren had underestimated me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, replaying everything in my mind. Lauren's distance, her late nights, the subtle shifts in her behavior. It all pointed to one thing. But I needed proof, real proof. I started digging. A Marine doesn't rush into battle unprepared, and I wasn't going to confront her again without knowing exactly what I was up against. Over the next week, I pieced it together. I managed to recover deleted texts from her old laptop, hidden behind a folder she probably thought I'd never look at. There were messages between her and a man named Jason. Sweet words. Inside jokes. And plans to meet. But Jason wasn't the only one. There were others, flirty texts, casual hookups, and even pictures. Lauren wasn't just unfaithful, she was living a double life. The pieces of her puzzle started to click into place, but I still wasn't ready for what came next. 3 nights ago, I decided it was time to confront her again. I had everything laid out, screenshots, messages, photos. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I just wanted the truth. When she walked into the living room, her expression changed as soon as she saw the papers spread out on the coffee table. "Lauren," I said quietly, "I know everything." She froze. For the first time, her confident facade cracked. "What is this?" she asked, her voice shaking. "It's the truth," I replied. "The hotel receipts. The texts. The lies. You've been cheating on me for months, haven't you?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then, like flipping a switch, her demeanor shifted. She laughed, bitter, forced. "So what?" she snapped. "Yeah, I've been seeing someone. And what are you going to do about it, Ethan? You're not exactly perfect either." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. "You don't get to deflect this, Lauren. I've done nothing but love and support you, and this," I gestured to the papers. "This is how you repay me." "You loved me," she hissed, stepping closer. "You loved the version of me you could control. I'm not your project, Ethan. You don't own me." Her words stung, but I didn't let her see it. "We're done," I said firmly. "I'll be contacting a lawyer tomorrow." That was when she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. For the first time, I thought it was over. I thought I could finally move on. But I underestimated just how far Lauren was willing to go to ruin me. The next night, I was sitting in my living room, sipping a glass of whiskey, and staring at the wreckage of what my life had become. Lauren hadn't come home, and I wasn't expecting her to. I told myself it was for the best, but the silence of the house felt suffocating. Then, at around 11 p.m., I heard a loud knock at the door. It wasn't the friendly kind, it was forceful, demanding. I set my glass down and walked cautiously toward the door, my instincts on high alert. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. Lauren stood on the porch, flanked by a man I instantly recognized from the photos I'd found, Jason. He wasn't alone. 3 other men stood behind him, their faces hard and unforgiving. These weren't just guys from the office. They looked like trouble. "What is this?" I asked, my voice cold. Lauren smirked, a glint of something cruel in her eyes. "We're here to talk, Ethan. About the divorce." Jason stepped forward, his posture aggressive. "Here's the deal," he said. "You're going to sign whatever papers Lauren gives you. No questions, no arguments. If you don't, well, we'll make sure you regret it." I looked at them, my pulse steady despite the adrenaline rushing through my veins. "You brought muscle to my house to intimidate me?" I asked, almost amused. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Jason laughed. "Oh, we know exactly who you are, Marine. But you're not in the Corps anymore, are you? You're just a washed-up vet running a gym. Do yourself a favor. Sit down, shut up, and sign." Lauren crossed her arms, leaning casually against the porch railing. "Come on, Ethan," she said, her tone dripping with mock sweetness. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I stared at her, a woman I once loved, now a stranger standing in front of me. Then I stepped back, letting the door swing open slightly. "You want to talk? Come on in." The men exchanged glances, then followed me into the house. Jason led the pack, swaggering like he already owned the place. Lauren stayed near the door, her arms crossed and a satisfied smirk on her face. As soon as they stepped into the living room, I made my move. Years of training kicked in. The first man barely saw me coming before my elbow connected with his jaw, sending him crashing into the coffee table. Jason lunged at me, but I was faster, driving my knee into his stomach before throwing him against the wall. The other 2 hesitated, realizing too late that they were outmatched. One swung a crowbar he'd been hiding under his jacket. I ducked, grabbed his wrist, and twisted until I heard the snap. He screamed, dropping the weapon as he collapsed to the ground. The last man tried to run, but I caught him by the collar and slammed him to the floor. His head hit the hardwood with a dull thud, and he didn't get back up. Lauren stood frozen in the corner, her phone clutched in her hand. Her smirk was gone, replaced by wide-eyed terror. "Call the cops, Lauren," I growled, stepping over Jason, who was groaning on the floor. "Or are you going to stand there and let them bleed out?" She didn't move. I stepped closer, my voice low and cold. "Did you really think I'd just roll over and let you take everything? Did you forget who I am?" When the flashing red and blue lights lit up the front yard, I raised my hands and stepped outside to meet the police. My breathing was steady, my heart calm. By the time they cuffed me, 2 of the men were dead, and 3 were barely conscious. Lauren followed us outside, trembling as she tried to explain her version of events to the officers. But her lies were unraveling, and she knew it. The evidence was in the security footage, the break-in, the threats, everything. I glanced back at her one last time as they led me to the cruiser. Her face was pale, her lips trembling, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She brought this on herself. An hour later, I sat in a holding cell at the Dallas police station, the events of the night playing over and over in my head. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving a dull ache in my muscles and the beginnings of a headache. Across the room, through the glass partition, I could see Lauren talking to an officer. Her arms were flailing, her voice rising and falling in a desperate attempt to control the narrative. I leaned back against the cold bench, watching her. She was spinning her story, no doubt painting herself as the victim. Tears. Half-truths. The same tactics she'd always used. But this time, there was a mountain of evidence working against her. After what felt like an eternity, an officer approached my cell and opened the door. "Mason, let's go." I followed him to an interview room where another officer, an older man with sharp eyes, was waiting. He gestured for me to sit. "Mr. Mason," he began, his tone neutral, we've reviewed the security footage from your home. It's clear that those men forced their way in. You acted in self-defense." I nodded. "And Lauren?" He sighed, crossing his arms. "She's in a lot of trouble. The footage shows her coordinating with the men outside before the break-in. She's claiming she didn't know they'd get violent, but it's not looking good for her." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The weight of what she'd done was already sinking in. The officer continued. "We'll need you to stay available for further questioning, but for now, you're free to go." When I stepped outside, the cold night air hit me like a slap. Lauren was standing in the parking lot, leaning against her car. Her once confident demeanor was gone, replaced by something desperate and raw. "You really did it this time, Ethan," she spat as I approached. "You've ruined everything." I stopped a few feet away from her, keeping my voice calm. "You did this to yourself, Lauren. I gave you everything, and this is how you repaid me." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You think you're innocent? You were always so controlling, always acting like you were better than me." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "I wasn't controlling. I was loyal. There's a difference." Her mouth opened to argue, but I cut her off. "Save it. We're done. You'll get what's coming to you, and I'll make sure of it." Lauren's face twisted into a mask of fury, but for the first time, I saw the fear behind her eyes. She had underestimated me, and now she was paying the price. I climbed into my truck, leaving her standing in the lot. As I drove home, the weight on my chest began to lift. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my life again. The next morning, I was going through the wreckage of the living room when I noticed something out of place. A sleek laptop was sitting on the coffee table, Lauren's. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. The inbox was full of emails, and the subject lines sent a chill down my spine: "Payment received, next steps, Brian's assets overview." As I dug deeper, the truth became horrifyingly clear. Lauren hadn't just been cheating, she'd been plotting. There were references to offshore accounts, forged documents, and financial transactions tied to my business. One email, dated just days ago, was addressed to someone named Martin: "We need to push this through before Ethan catches on. If we can pull this off, we'll walk away with everything." It wasn't just Martin. Another name stood out: Jason. The man she'd brought to my house wasn't just a fling. He was her partner in crime. Together, they'd been siphoning money from my accounts for months, setting me up to take the fall for embezzlement. My hands shook as I took photos of the emails and files. I barely had time to process what I was seeing when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: "You've made a big mistake, Ethan. Drop this, or else." I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. Whoever these people were, they were connected. Dangerous. And now they knew I was onto them. The text sent a cold jolt through me. Whoever had sent it wasn't bluffing, but I wasn't backing down. I had the proof I needed, and now I needed a plan. I packed up the laptop and the photos I'd taken and drove straight to my attorney's office. Jackson Reed had been my lawyer for years, and he was one of the few people I trusted completely. When I showed him the evidence, his face darkened. "Ethan, this isn't just infidelity," he said, flipping through the screenshots. "This is full-scale fraud. She's been setting you up to take the fall. Can we nail her?" I asked. Jackson nodded, his expression grim. "Absolutely. But you need to be careful. If this Martin and Jason are as connected as they seem, they won't go down without a fight. You're a threat to their operation now." As we finalized the legal groundwork, Jackson recommended I turn the files over to the police. I agreed, but first, I needed to confront Lauren one last time. Not out of anger, but to ensure she understood the damage she'd done, and that she couldn't escape it. I drove to the cabin, a secluded property we'd bought years ago as a retreat. Lauren had sent me a text earlier that day, "We need to talk. Meet me at the cabin tonight." Alone. It felt like a trap, but I was prepared. The cabin was an hour outside Dallas, surrounded by dense woods and far from any neighbors. When I arrived, her car was parked outside. The porch light was on, casting eerie shadows across the clearing. I stepped inside to find Lauren sitting at the dining table, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked up, her expression guarded. "You came," she said, setting the glass down. "Cut the act, Lauren," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Why am I here?" She leaned back in her chair, her lips curving into a bitter smile. "You've always been so dramatic, Ethan. I just wanted to talk. To figure out how we end this without destroying each other." "Destroying each other?" I scoffed. "You brought this on yourself. You cheated. You stole. And now you want to negotiate?" Her face twisted, anger flashing in her eyes. "You don't understand. I didn't have a choice. Jason, Martin, they promised this would be clean, that you wouldn't even notice until it was too late. You think that justifies what you've done?" I asked, stepping closer. "You think that excuses the lies, the betrayal? You've put a target on my back, Lauren. This isn't about a marriage anymore. This is about survival." Before she could respond, the sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the tense silence. I moved to the window and saw headlights cutting through the darkness. A black SUV pulled up, and two men stepped out, Jason and another guy I didn't recognize. Lauren's face went pale. "Ethan, listen to me." "No," I snapped. "You listen. What's going on?" She hesitated, then blurted, "Jason doesn't know I told you everything. He thinks I can still control this." I stared at her, stunned. "You told him I'd roll over? That I'd just let this happen?" The door burst open before she could answer. Jason strode in, flanked by the second man, his expression cold and menacing. Well, Jason said, his voice dripping with mock amusement. "A little reunion, huh? Ethan, you've been causing us a lot of trouble." I stepped forward, standing between him and Lauren. "You picked the wrong guy to mess with, Jason." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about you. It never was. You're just a piece of the puzzle, a means to an end." Before I could respond, Jason pulled a gun from his jacket, pointing it directly at me. "You're going to delete everything you found. All the files, all the evidence. Then, you're going to disappear." Behind me, I heard Lauren gasp. "Jason, this wasn't the deal," he spun on her, his expression dark. "The deal changed the moment he started snooping around. You should have kept him on a leash." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. Jason was distracted, his focus divided. This was my moment. In a flash, I lunged forward, grabbing the barrel of the gun and twisting it away. The shot rang out, deafening in the small cabin, but it missed its mark. I drove my knee into Jason's stomach, sending him stumbling back. The second man charged at me, but years of training kicked in. I sidestepped his attack and landed a solid punch to his jaw, knocking him to the ground. Jason recovered quickly, but I was faster. I grabbed the gun from his hand and aimed it at him, my breathing heavy. "It's over," I said, my voice low and steady. "You're done." The sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder by the second. Jason's face twisted in frustration as flashing red and blue lights illuminated the cabin. The police had arrived. Hours later, I sat in a police station once again, but this time, I wasn't the one in cuffs. Jason, Lauren, and the others had been arrested, the evidence from Lauren's laptop sealing their fate. The officers commended me for my quick thinking, but the relief I felt was bittersweet. Lauren had been escorted out of the station in handcuffs, her once confident demeanor replaced by a hollow, defeated look. As she passed me, she stopped for a moment, her eyes searching mine. "I didn't want it to end like this," she whispered. "Neither did I replied quietly. "But you made your choices." She was led away, and I walked outside, the cold air hitting me like a cleansing wave. The nightmare was over, but the scars it left behind would take time to heal. As the sun rose over Dallas, I climbed into my truck and drove away, leaving the wreckage of my old life behind. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: I was finally free.